week, and they had Senator Rachel Zenzinger and Lisa
Cutter.
well, no,
No?
Senator Zenzinger is the chair of the Joint Budget Committee, and she's also a former teacher. And then they had Lisa Weil, who is the president of Great Education Colorado, and they had Kathy Plummer, who is a new State Board of Education member on it. So they had these three people on it, and one of the things that they talked about was the fact that Commissioner Anthus is leaving, and she's been the state commissioner for several years. She's really good. Her guidance has been very much aligned with the league, okay, and things that we consider to be very important. And so Kathy Plummer was really stressing about the fact that we need to, not just us, but everybody who was on that call needs to be very active in the public comment as they're interviewing these different candidates for state commissioner, because they could make a gigantic difference in the emphasis of what happens and what does not happen in the State Board of Ed. So they are going to be announcing when they have the interviews and when they are going to have public comment on the State Board of Ed web page. But right now they're getting ready for that whole process. But it's going to be extremely important. For example, in November of 2022, we had the new state standards that were approved, right? And they're much better than they were. They're very inclusive. They bring in diverse populations and the study of diverse populations into the social studies. And so we have a rogue school district, which is Woodland Park, which is close to, in my understanding, is close to Colorado Springs. And they're saying they're not going to follow the state standards. They're going to adopt the American Heritage Standards, which the state board did not approve. I mean, there was a big conversation. I listened to that meeting and they did not approve it. So how those things are going to be handled will make a big difference with who is the commissioner. I'm trying to see on my notes if there was anything. Okay. Anything more about that they said?
What will they do if they don't comply? What will happen?
That's state law. They have until, this is statute. It's in statute.
Yeah, but what would happen?
They have until 2024 to comply. So nothing can happen until then. So I would imagine there's going to be a lot of pressure placed on the school district.
So maybe the kids would not be certified as graduates of a school?
Yeah, just all sorts of stuff. I mean, if they're not following the standards, if they're not teaching to the standards, that's really problematic. Okay. Yeah. So that was the one thing I was going to talk about.
When somebody graduates in Colorado, do they get a diploma from the state? How does that work? No, it comes from the school.
No, it's the
right?
district. It's the district.
The district.
Yeah. Yeah. I would
So they
imagine.
could still get out their diplomas.
Yeah, but if they'll be sued for sure if they're not going to be in compliance.
Yeah.
Right. But no, they can't do anything until the deadline in 2024. So, yeah. And with everything that's happening in the country, across the country, this is something we can't take for granted. We really have to
No.
No.
watch. And so it's important. Lois and Sandy, on our education task force website, we have all the links for the State Board of Education meetings and the links for, the Colorado Department of Ed and all sorts of resources for people to be able to do that, to be able to keep an eye on what's happening.
Right.
So, yeah. So I don't know, shall we talk about school districts and what you have a very practical application, in both of your districts of what you're doing.
I just wanted to ask a question about the state board. I observed part of, I think, the last meeting and want to be sure to stay in touch with that. And I don't think I have that on my calendar. Can you tell me when they are as a rule? It's okay. I can look it up. I just need to follow through on that.
I just
Yeah.
put the link to the Education Task Force webpage in the chat.
Great.
A list of the board
on
meetings
there. Okay.
should be on there,
Yeah,
as
it's in
well
a
as
box.
links. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
as well as links to sign up to be an observer.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. And the links that are on the task force that bring you to the state board meetings, you can watch them and you can get the agendas ahead of time
Right.
for what's happening, because sometimes they're one day and sometimes they're 2 days, but a lot of times the second day is more of a closed executive session. So yeah, so that's all accessible, in the links there.
And I did not follow through in submitting a report because I was waiting to get instructions about that. So I didn't do any written report after I observed last time.
Yeah, well, this is just so new.
Yeah.
And that is one thing I would love to have somebody coordinate this task force. Because I'm doing a lot of other things, being the co-director for the state, on action advocacy. So it'd be really good for somebody to just be able to focus, in this area.
Well, I can't do it for you. I am
Well, you're-
too busy with another
Right.
task force.
you have the-
Yeah, you're
Other
already
task.
on one,
Yeah,
Sandy.
so I'd love to get somebody new, somebody who is not doing some of this leadership,
Mhm.
in either the local leagues or the task forces. I think that would be really, really perfect. And I think, if I find it very rewarding to do this kind of, this work, and I think other people would as well. And it's not like we throw you out there and say, good luck, you have a lot of support. So, all right. Well, so we talk about, the Observer Corps is nothing I've been trained in, so I need to learn more about this. And I think hearing what you both are doing very practically within the school districts where you live is so helpful, because you provide models for us. So go for it.
Well, Sandy, you want to go first? Or you want me to?
You go ahead.
Okay.
I'll fill in.
Okay. Well, can I just say I sort of stumbled into this whole process. I went back and looked at my notes. I have a boatload of notes. If you go back to August 17th of 2021, that's when it was the first board meeting of the Mesa County School Board for the 2021-22 academic year. And it started out, it was chaotic. It started out with a whole group of angry protesters, many of them from out of the district, and they were anti-masking, anti-vaccine protesters, protesting policies that the district didn't have in place because there were no vaccine or mask mandates. But they crowded into the meeting room. They yelled, they shouted, they interrupted board members who tried to speak. They threatened to have the district superintendent fired. It was not possible to continue the meeting. And so the police escorted the board members away from the meeting room to their cars, and they had to resume online later that night. So when I heard about that, I knew something not good was happening. At roughly the same time, there were three, it was approaching campaign season for the election of 3 replacement board members, and a block of 3 conservative candidates who ran as a block were campaigning on the grounds that they would be not just fiscally responsible, but they didn't use the term critical race theory in so many words, but they sort of implied they'd be watching that, they'd be doing all these things. So I started on my own sitting in on school board meetings just to see what the heck was going on. That was in October of 2021. And I was not the only one who was disturbed by that whole series of events, because one of the school board members, who was a long time, I think he'd been on the school board for like 8 years, was a 42-year education veteran, resigned just because he considered the environment too hostile and too political and didn't think that had any place in school board proceedings. So bottom line, the block of, even though prior to that, candidates for school board positions had run on a nonpartisan basis. The 3 conservative bloc candidates were all elected and sort of voted themselves into president, vice president, and treasurer.
Wow.
Shortly after that, they held a special meeting, actually 2 back-to-back special meetings, where they were going to review certain legal aspects of the employment contracts of the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the director of equity and inclusion. And this came the weekend after Douglas County had booted their superintendent out. So
What county are
again,
you in?
I'm sorry, what?
What county are you in?
Mesa County.
That's over
Okay.
by Grand Junction.
It's as far west as you can get in the state without being in Utah. So bottom line, lots going on. And at that particular meeting, at one of the special meetings, several League of Women Voters members showed up holding signs talking about the legal requirement that that other cultures be included in social studies classes. And at that point I said, so I joined the League of Women Voters kind of on the spot.
Great.
And I sort of, this is very impromptu, but I went to the website, the Colorado League of Women Voters website. I downloaded documents in the document library, and it was the Observer Corps handbook and guidelines on what an observer did and didn't do, and also background on sunshine laws.
Mhm.
And I basically kind of trained myself. So with that as background, I'd been observing meetings all along on my own behalf. I started observing meetings on the league's behalf. I made myself a button and I wore it to every meeting. And during the public comment period, you sign up to take part. On the sign up sheet, I list my name and then say, not commenting today, just observing on behalf of the League of Women Voters.
Nice.
And the first couple of times, one member of the board reads the list of people who signed up so that they, it's their turn to speak. The first couple of times he ran across my name, he read the whole thing. So now everybody knows who I am and that I'm not commenting, but I'm there on behalf of the League of Women Voters. After a while, after a couple of meetings, he stopped doing that. But at least the fact that I was there was known to pretty much everybody. How can I say this? Some of the things I did I took straight from the guidelines that were on the state website. Other things I sort of invented on my own. Just because of the way the room is set up, there's a group of seats on one side, I'm center aisle, and a group of seats on the other. And there's a large group of pretty far right conservative folks who community members, some parents, some not, who show up at meetings on a regular basis. They always sit on the right.
I
This
love
is a
it.
very literal interpretation. They always sit on the right. And on the left is a smattering of other people, maybe folks who are there for other reasons. Lots of times if teachers show up, they sit on the left. So I made a point of never sitting in the same place twice, so they wouldn't associate me with any particular political persuasion. And people would ask me, after a while they'd say, so what's with the button? During the break, they'd kind of start to get curious about who this woman was who didn't take part in public comments, but stayed for the entire meeting. Lots of folks wheel in, sign up to comment, and leave as soon as they're through talking. Don't stick around for the rest of the meeting, so they don't hear many of the presentations. They don't learn about budget. They don't learn about issues the district's facing. They just listen to themselves talk and leave. And I don't do that. I stay to the bitter end, partly because you learn more, but also because the way they structure it in Mesa County, at the very end of the meeting, they have what they call board discussion, but that's where the board members talk to each other about what they just heard. So if there's been a series of presentations, they'll say, well, what did you think of that? Did you have any questions? Blah, 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 blah. And you learn a heck of a lot just from that. But it is at the very end of the meeting. And by then, 90% of the audience has left. About, I want to say 4 or 5 months after I started observing the school district, another league member joined me. So now there are 2 of us, and we back each other up in terms of attending meetings and doing the reports. But we're recognizable at this point because the board members for sure know who we are. And it's kind of interesting. The first academic year that was dealing with COVID and the after effects of COVID and learning loss and teacher salaries and teacher insurance and all that kind of stuff. This academic year is dominated by 2 fairly controversial issues: the inclusion of a school-based healthcare clinic inside of a new high school building being built, and because of drops in student enrollment, consolidation of schools and closing of some.
Yeah.
Big topic, hundreds of people showing up at meetings. There was one regular meeting immediately followed by a special meeting on the subject of school closures. Lots of people testified. The public comment period, which is ordinarily capped at an hour, went on for 3 hours.
Wow.
The meeting, which started at 5 o'clock, ended at midnight.
Wow.
I guess.
Me and the janitor were the last ones out the door. But everybody had already left, so the board's looking straight at me, so they know I'm there. The subsequent special meeting, about 5 days later, started at 5, got over at 10. But in between those 2 meetings, the board said, we really do want to hear from the community as a whole, not just the folks who signed up to speak. So send us your emails. And so I sent an email, not on the league's behalf, on my own. Said, okay, I understand the criteria. I understand you have to do something. Get it. I understand you're between a rock and a hard place. Get that as well. But in looking at the criteria that you use to determine which schools to consolidate and which to close, I see some things that were left out, and I listed them specifically. And, it was pretty short, pretty to the point. And I got, within a matter of minutes, I got responses from 3 out of 5 of the school board members.
Awesome.
Wow.
And the president said, she was one of the conservative bloc candidates, said, thank you for your input. It means a lot because I know you regularly attend meetings.
Mhm.
And then later on in that same meeting, they indicated that between the first and the second meeting, they got 263 emails.
Hmm.
So the fact that they took the time to respond means that your presence is noted. And if you do provide input, they listen to it more than they do random stuff.
Here's a question. Laura, you deserve a medal. But here's a question. Now, if she wanted to send an email on behalf of League, she would have to get approval from the county board,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
From the
So-
Mesa
from the
League.
Mesa County
Yeah.
chapter, yes.
Because
Right.
it's a
And that
local
would,
issue.
that would be a great thing to do.
Well, here's the deal, and this is, I'm on the leadership team for the Mesa County chapter, and I talked to the other members of the team about, does the league have a position on this issue of how do you deal with declining student enrollment? How do you go about, if you have to close schools, what criteria do you use? How do you go about it? And we couldn't find really anything that
Yeah.
dealt with that specifically. There's a lot of
We
stuff
do
about,
have, we do have
funding.
broader ones that would
Yeah.
cover it.
right.
I sent
Well, it was one of those
several-
deals where, because it was only 5 days between the 2 meetings,
Yeah,
I just
Yeah.
sort of responded on my own.
right.
Mhm. And I sent those to you, right? I did, because you asked about those positions.
No, but I
and
kind
did-
of looked them up.
You should have. Man, I know I sent that email, so I'm wondering why you didn't get it.
Hmm.
Huh.
But anyway,
again, they were
broader,
big-
that's why we have such broad positions, because they cover
Right.
a lot of things.
And there was nothing on the federal level, it was local. And it was one of the first like 2 or 3 of the positions in the book. So I have to see if I can look
On
that
the
up.
state level, Kathy?
Yeah, on the state level. Because there really was nothing on the federal level that approached it. And it had to do with what the state legislature could do, and it had to do with what local districts, and the
Okay.
Board of Ed.
Well, the issue's still out there. I mean, they have not voted on, they had a demographer who kind of started the process and was the one who made the recommendations about closing 3 specific schools. And now there's some pushback on, if you have to close something, why those 3?
And
Right.
that's
It's the
also
same
an
thing
issue
that's happening
affecting other
everywhere.
districts.
They're
I'm
all
sorry, what's
doing it.
That's also an issue affecting other districts, including Denver Public Schools.
Yes.
I know.
So it
'cause-
isn't just Mesa.
oh,
it's
no, it's not.
factors.
In fact, it was kind of funny
Jefferson
because
too.
I moved to Grand Junction from Denver, and I still get the
Okay.
Denver Post. And on the same day
Yep.
that the front page story in the Grand Junction Sentinel was about closing schools, it was the same day that the Denver Post had. I mean, it's almost the same. The numbers were different, but the same basic issue, and that is when enrollment declines, what the heck do you do?
It proves that the baby boom is over,
Yes, it is.
finally.
Did you get any kind of negative feedback from the people who sat on the right, or any of the people that showed up for those meetings?
Negative feedback to what? To my
Just
being there?
you
I
being
think
there.
that's a no.
Yeah.
No, it's a no. It's definitely a no. I'll tell you how I know this. In the beginning, right after the big angry group showed up and, disrupted the meeting, there was a large group of pretty conservative attendees, and it's now dwindled down to a core group of about 20 to 25.
Mhm.
And they tend to meet in the parking lot outside and then come into the meeting room as a group. And then during the break in the meeting, there's one woman who brings snacks because the meetings are so dang long. And she only gives them, for a long time, she only gave them to the people sitting on the right. But because I was all over the place, she started, it was an interesting day because she offered me a snack. The woman offered me a snack. So I figured that was an indication that I must not be awful.
That's great. I love it.
You're gonna be the,
Well,
the big mediator in Mesa County. Oh, gosh.
I find it interesting that the conservatives sit on the right,
Yeah.
which in a wedding is the groom's side,
I know,
right?
I know.
So that's patriarchal. Ooh, yeah, it all goes back to that patriarchy.
But I mean, that's so literal that I thought it was kind of funny.
It's funny, yeah.
I
That's
think,
amazing.
I know
You've done
comment-
wonderful work.
yes, yes.
Well, since then, here's another, since then, we have recruited another league member who's now observing the county commission.
Oh,
Because a
Oh,
lot of the
that's
issues
great.
mhm.
that are driving low student enrollment are related to the lack of affordable housing.
Yeah.
People can't afford both housing and a kid, so they choose the house, or they go someplace else to find more affordable housing. So, I mean, there's some interrelated issues at work. So we figured, well, let's keep eyes on at least two of the organizations. And then we're trying to find somebody to look in on city council, because city council just appointed for the first time ever, a housing manager, housing director.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's the deal.
Very impressive.
Well, and I got a snack from the lady on the right, so.
I know that was it. What your story sounds really familiar to what I have heard from the people here who have gone to the Thompson School District meetings,
Mhm.
because we've had the same kind of contention and the same kind of people normally coming up from Berthoud, which is in the district with us, but that tends to be more of the concentration of people from the right who have attended. But I know that some people were actually concerned about their safety.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah.
Hmm.
And that had prohibited them making that choice.
Well, I heard that right after the big contentious meeting where the police had to escort the board to their cars. There were
Right.
some people who had that feeling, but I never felt that way. I mean, there's security there. There's a whole group of security people at the back of the room. So I just figured, well,
Uh-huh,
what's the worst that can happen?
uh-huh.
But no, I never really did. I mean, I can't say that people are always treating each other warmly,
Mhm.
but there doesn't seem to be a lot of active hostility.
Okay. The people that the other member who was observing with you, were you both there, or did you tag team the days that you observed?
Most of the time we're both there,
Okay.
but not always. And we do that partly because this is one of the advantages of having the same people attending meetings over time. She's a retired teacher. I am not. I've never taught in my life, but it takes a while just to get some context.
Yeah.
And for me, just to learn the terminology.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they start throwing around terms, informal presentations to the board, like you're supposed to know what they mean.
Right.
And I don't.
Yeah.
So between the two of us, I turn to her and say, what's an FTE?
Exactly.
What are ESSER funds? But after a while, you get so you know that stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I think perhaps that was one of the reasons that it was just good to have another set of ears there.
Mhm.
Not that you can't, the meetings are recorded.
Mhm.
You can watch them online, you can watch them in person, but what I do is take notes in shorthand.
Ah.
And then if they have presentations, they've got 3 big screens. So if there's a presentation with a lot of charts, graphs, data, I'll just take a cell phone picture of the screen.
Okay.
And then if in the process of transcribing my own shorthand, which is always a sort of iffy process, if I miss something or I can't quite remember what was said, I can just go back and look at the recording and fill in any gaps.
Cool.
So I mean, one way or another, you
Mhm.
tend to get it right.
Mhm. Very cool. Sandy, what are you doing in Greeley?
I'm going to go back. I did not look up dates. I wish I had, but I was going back. We've had an observer for fairly active for some time. Some of you may know Janine Reed, and she was that leader and did a training. And so I took over when Janine moved to the Western Slope, maybe 18 months ago. Our concerns were, we became concerned when we were doing candidate forums for school boards in their last election. And in some of the districts near us, there were fairly strong different viewpoints being represented in the candidate pool. And in one district, we actually had to call security to enforce procedures, and we had some pushback. I've never felt afraid in a league forum until that night, and I was afraid. And Janine was still here then, and so I was so thankful for the opportunity to observe how she handled things. So that's when we started keeping our ears and eyes open. And sometime last spring, after the first of the year, we began attending board meetings. And we got big observer core buttons. I don't always wear mine, and I don't always let my husband wear his, because if I think he's going to roll his eyes, if it's really going to be an issue, we go as people, as citizens. We have a fairly strong and growing more organized contingency of folks who come to every meeting. They were primarily initially concerned about masks and vaccines. They're still concerned about masks and vaccines. They are very opposed to our excellent director, speak negatively to and about her, disrespectfully to and about her at the meetings. And so maybe 6 weeks ago, they were so disruptive that the board could not conduct their business. The meetings had to be ended. One night, they were bringing in petitions about books they want. They say they are not wanting the books banned. They want parental permission for their kids to access these books. And they have quite a few, and they had duplicated petitions. And so maybe 8 of them during public comment approached the dais and put these on the floor, just piles and piles and piles of paper. And that the meeting was recessed. And then this happened a second time. And we typically sit with the security guard in his area. And we left that meeting. He asked us to, everybody was supposed to, but the others stayed in the building. And I think that my husband and I were the only league observers that night. And so after that, folks across Greeley of various groups are at nearly every meeting as well. Several retired or former school board members are now attending. I'm speaking regularly during public comment. Our public comment has gone various different ways in the last year. And now it's 2 minutes, one time. And same thing as you said, Lois, that the people speak and they leave, but we stay. And most of the people who come in support of the board also stay. And the board really appreciates it. We had also a coalition, if you will, a block of candidates who ran on a conservative ticket. One has remained aligned with that viewpoint, one has not, and one is non-committal. But the one of them has become an excellent board member. And I have had coffee with him and gotten acquainted with him, shared what the league is doing and others as well. I want to be sure I don't forget anything. Oh, so the primary concerns now are books, that they have several, and they We have a new procedure for how books are challenged and the process, the criteria that is established for retaining or not having a book. Occasionally they mention critical race theory. Occasionally they mention social emotional learning. I was a professional counselor educator. I am high alert to that one and will speak to that issue. Already have once as a citizen. That's something that Lois, you mentioned too. I'm really clear and they kind of know that if my button is on, I'm representing the league.
Right.
I'm not identified that way, then I typically say I'm representing myself. Our league has written a letter to the board and the administration expressing our support and our belief in public education and our willingness to support them, however that would be. So we've been vocal directly to the board. The league has not, I have not spoken on behalf of the league, nobody has. At a board meeting, we've more spoken as individuals, and we've had several league members do that. Part of the reason is if we speak on behalf of the league, we've got to have total league support. And of course, we've got position statements about public ed and inclusivity and diversity. We have all of that to back us up, but we would not speak without board approval ahead of time. So that's how we did the letter last time. You mentioned safety. They've increased our security quite a bit, cameras, and we typically have to go into the overflow room. There's not room in our board meeting space. They've had to, for safety issues, there aren't as many chairs in the boardroom anymore. And some speakers have asked to be escorted to their cars after board meetings. And frankly, safety is a concern for me as well. I would not go to my car alone after a board meeting. And we are acquainted with security officers and intend to keep it that way as they revolve and change. By the way, some of our leaders are pastors, and among the other things that they want is to have Bible taught in our schools, in school time as part of the curriculum. And one said that our suicide rate would go down when that happens.
You said these were leaguers?
What?
These were
Leaders.
Leaguers? Leaders.
Pastors,
Yes.
preachers, very conservative, and they are part of this group. We have a couple pastors, especially one that's among the leaders in the more. And then there is a religious inclined person that comes over from Larimer, Fort Collins. But now you have to be a resident of District 6 to speak.
Good.
So that has helped because a lot of people were speaking that didn't live here and there was no way to know. And so now you have to be a resident and we have to show ID if we're going to speak. And we also have to sign in when we come to the meetings. So we're seeing a lot more for security. And the contention isn't going away. And we're already looking to next year's election. We have one position, I believe, and already one of the more right-leaning people who speaks at the board meeting, she announced her candidacy during public comment at a school board meeting. So we already know we have one person. So in terms of the state board meeting was in Greeley. So we watched the vote on the curriculum, social studies curriculum. That's also an issue here. And I can tell you teachers are worried. High school teachers who teach history are worried.
Yep.
Because they're already busy and stressed, and to have any parent challenge them for what they teach in their class, anything they might say. One teacher was called by name at the last board meeting. I might add that she's a lesbian. Find that interesting. And she was criticized by name during public comment by one of the folks for something she had said. So teachers are worried. We're worried. We're active, and fortunately our league is so small and we need to be observing all of our meetings. We had one other person doing other meetings. That person is no longer doing that. So the observer corps for us is constant, and we believe it's so important. And So we struggle with the broader Observer Corps, but right now our priority is the school.
Yeah.
And it needs to be our county commissioners. But
Mhm.
we just don't have the people power to go around.
Uh-huh.
And
As
that's
a-
where we're struggling.
It was in, I think, the Washington Post, I think today. There was an article that was reporting a RAND study about school board meetings and the fact that it was that teachers are concerned about the parents and, the parents making the comments, not necessarily the politicians, but definitely the parents in the district.
Yeah, it's easy to back down because it's constant.
Yeah.
And that's what we're worried about for our leaders in our school. When it comes to curriculum issues, after all of this book headache, are they just going to ask teachers to don't make any waves? And that's not an answer.
Well, let me just offer a little bit of a counterpoint to that, because after having watched this particular group of school board members for slightly more than a year, it started out the conservative 3 and the other 2 were more progressive. Over time, I have to say, they're moderating as a group. And if you watch how they talk in that last little bit at the end, when they're saying, well, this is what I heard, this is what I think, you can start to identify specific roles that they have over and above their political leanings. There's one woman who's more progressive, but she's an engineering professor from Colorado Mesa University. She's very data driven. She's very smart. She's the one who will be the first one to say, wait a minute, in that presentation we just heard, this point did not make sense to me. Can you back it up with something?
Great.
The president of the school board, who at heart is a people pleaser. I
Mm.
mean, over and above any political, leaning she may have, she's the one that is constantly trying to find some sort of middle ground so that we won't get quite so, divided, and on a whole variety of issues. There's one guy who's a coach, has a long time, has several students in the district, and also coaches football. And he doesn't say much, but when he does, it comes at the very end of the meeting, and he'll be the one that says, I think we should do this. So he only says like one sentence, but it wraps it all up at the end. So, I mean, as a group, they're operating more like an effective unit than I would have thought. And I'm not the only one who says that. There's one member, long-term member of the Mesa County chapter who used to be, I think he's in his 80s now, but he used to be the assistant superintendent for the school district, and he was very worried. He took me to coffee early on and said, oh, this is what I'm looking for and this is what I'm afraid of. And he sent me a text message about 6 weeks ago saying, I'm starting to think maybe they're not so bad. Maybe even a little bit good. So, I mean, what I'm saying is they take a lot of time to make a decision, don't just knee jerk their way through. And that results in having long meetings and a lot of special meetings in between regularly scheduled ones, but at least they can arrive at something that's defensible.
Totally random. You're right.
Th-
I'm
that's-
good with taking time, no
Yeah.
Oh,
knee
yeah,
jerk
me too.
reactions.
I did it.
I know,
Yeah.
I was fine.
it's
I have-
showing that they
After
care.
sitting through those 2 meetings, one was 7 hours and the other was 5. I figured I know what they're talking about.
There's a statistical calculation that's that you see in quantitative analysis that's called regression to the mean. And
Mhm.
over time, this is
Yeah.
exactly what
Yeah.
it sounded like, was regression to the mean.
I don't know how long you've all been here, but Jefferson County went through this years ago. The league wasn't paying enough attention. And 3 people got elected as a group that were very right wing. And everybody was shocked that they even got elected because you know, it was like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? They had a recall and actually had to go through a whole election, and they eventually got some less reactive people in there. And this last election, everybody is pretty progressive, I'd say. So right now we're doing good, but we don't have a real good observer corps like you do, and we're trying to get it going. But you've just done a wonderful job, both of you.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, I have to say it is hard though, because if you're looking for people to volunteer to do things for the chapter, the Observer Corps is a time commitment,
Yes.
and it's a commitment of bandwidth. You know? Are you willing to learn the terminology and get some kind of context for the issues that's being dealt with? So I mean,
But what's
there's some
more
people who
important?
don't have that time. Or
Yeah.
or
More
rather do
important
something
than
more structured.
education of our kids, right?
So Lois and Sandy M, what's your monthly commitment, do you say?
To Observer
Time
Corps,
commitment.
Yeah, time commitment.
in addition to other league things, minimal 6 hours, minimal. And that's only one board.
Okay,
Somebody should be watching our city council, somebody should be watching our commissioners. There are other districts. So we just are not able to cover the meetings we
Sure.
have. But I would not have to go to every meeting. Lois said, we say if you can go once a month, that's enough. But because of the rapid pace of what's happening here and
Yeah.
the high stakes, I just feel like we have to be there every meeting.
Could
Yeah.
you entice people, more people, if they don't have to go in person, because you can listen to those recordings
Oh, yeah.
at your
Yeah, we-
leisure? But then.
In fact,
but
the
then-
other person we lost just now did just watch recordings.
Okay,
Yeah,
But-
and
but
still
you-
she said it was too much.
you lose the board members seeing you, so it's
Yeah.
it's a
Right.
kind of a give and
We
take.
lose our influence, although we've written letters like for when Janine was still here, I think Kathleen may have this year, I'm not sure, I didn't. Anyway, we send the leader, just want you to know that we have somebody as our observer corps watching your meeting. So they're on notice.
Mhm.
And our city council, our mayor wants us there and also understands that we don't have the people power, and he also supports us being where we are.
Yeah,
I forgot to
So-
mention that too. Before we start observing an organization, I send an email that says, well, with the school district at the beginning of each academic year, I just send them an email, says, okay, we're going to be observing on behalf of the League of Women Voters. These are our names. You can spot us because we're wearing this button. And I take a picture of the button and email it to them so they know this is who we are.
Good for you.
I love it.
Same thing with county commission, just say, we're gonna be here. We're not there to heckle you. We're not there to give you a bad time.
Nope.
We're just there to watch and listen and learn.
Yeah.
Mm. And we have an introductory letter template in the Observer Corps toolkit. And
I think I stole that and turned it into an email.
great.
I
Yeah, that's
stole a lot of stuff.
exactly. No, it's not stealing. That's what it's there for. So, if it's a state board or commission or something, I'm very happy to sign the letters. Kathy can sign the letter.
Right.
Mhm.
One other thing we tried, and this is fairly recent, just to get people interested in the idea, we started an Observe the Observer offer. Started this around at the end of last year. We had a member meeting where we had little stations set up around the meeting room, and you could go learn about various aspects of the league. One of them is Observer Corps. I said, okay, you can sign up to just observe an observer. Come along with us, sit in on a meeting, see what we see, and help us, we can sort of explain which things are worth noting and which things aren't.
Mhm.
Some people are frightened by the prospect. They think they almost have to take the minutes.
Yeah.
And we said, no, they've got somebody to take the minutes. That's not, you're looking for issues. You're looking for things that are in alignment with league positions, you don't have to take the minutes.
I mean, actually specific, everything that happens, you don't.
Yeah, you don't have to note
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
that happens.
No, and really you're looking more for things that are out of alignment with league
Yes.
positions almost, you know? I mean, it's sad that what we're doing is looking for problems.
Yeah.
But at the same time, somebody's gotta.
Yeah. I even started developing a glossary of terms, and this is just for the school board, not for the county commissioners, but they really do have their own language. Well, every organization does, but they've got their own language. And so the big items that they tend to turn into an acronym, I had a handout that said, this is what this is.
I went to the state board one time recently, and I couldn't figure out half the stuff they were talking about.
I know.
That's very, very typical of education to use acronyms.
Well,
Very
and as it turns out, my daughter is a teacher in the district.
typical.
So if I didn't understand a term, I just call her up and say, what the heck is this?
That's perfect. Hey, I was in education for years, and it's I still go, what the heck are they talking about?
Yeah.
I have to leave. I have another meeting at 6:30.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're pretty much to the end
Okay.
of this. I so appreciate your presentation.
Mhm.
Because the having both of you talk about this from your own, venues is really, really helpful.
Mhm.
To have a solid understanding. So I don't know, can we advertise this video? I think it would be,
Sure. I don't know, why not?
with the state membership, because I think it would be really helpful for people. They hear the term Observer Corps, but they don't quite know
Know
how
what
to
it is.
do it, what to
Mhm.
do,
Right.
And I think
Well,
it's-
and I,
What was
Go
kind of interesting was Sandy and I kind of found each other and just
Yeah.
started informally comparing notes. And for the most part, we were approaching it the same way.
yeah, you were kind of making it up as you go along. And
Parts of it, yeah.
that's the thing, is that I mean, it doesn't have to be this big formal thing. And
Mhm.
that's what's I think so many people find daunting, is that, they're looking for they're responsible for finding something bad, or and if they miss something, oh God, what's going to happen? The fall of our public education system. So
Right.
I think people just worry,
do.
about the depth of the responsibility.
Well,
I
yeah,
can-
and some people thought they had to fill out a full-blown report for
Yeah.
every single meeting. And what I said was, if they're talking about the same issue over a series of 3 meetings, wrap them all together into one package, because it'll make more sense that way anyway.
Yeah. And
You
do
know,
you,
Yeah.
do you post? your
I
notes?
started as an observer corps. I wish I don't know when, but I observed the city council meetings for a long time and nothing was wrong. And it's a wonderful
Great.
way. It's a wonderful way to get introduced to the league. It's
Yeah.
and so starting with the well functioning at that point, I'm still real pleased with our city council, but it was fascinating. And I got acquainted with people. There was nothing to report. It was boring and I loved it.
That's great.
Beautiful.
So,
Beautiful.
it's a great way for new members, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You don't have
It's
to be the chair of the
tangible.
leaguers, and it's so important. I think it's among the most important things we do, in
Do you-
addition to voter services, but
Yeah.
this is all the time.
Do you post the notes on your local league?
No,
in
what
documents
we-
or someplace?
But we have, I'm also co-chair of our league and have just begun having a brief report at every meeting. If there's something to report, I
Yeah.
report. If there's nothing to report, we don't need to report.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We don't need files of nothing happened.
right.
So we go more by, like right now, it would be our redistricting. That would certainly, if we had an observer.
Yeah.
That would
Right.
clearly be
Mhm.
something in our district.
Mhm.
Otherwise, all's
Yeah.
well.
Okay,
We,
cool.
we post all the reports, but there isn't one per meeting on Club Express. And then at the end of the school year, I did kind of a wrap up on
Mhm.
this is what we saw happen. These are things that were related and how they were resolved. There were 2 different curriculum programs that were approved, for example, that kind of thing. These were highlights. These are decisions made. And just, posted that. Sort of like an academic year in review.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Keep on keeping on. Really appreciate it.
Oh, sure.
All right.
Great.
Thing. Come
Thank you,
back
ladies.
again, August 3rd or
Yes.
April 3rd.
Okay,
August 3rd. Yeah, sure.
August, no, April. My
That's with
word.
an A,
A word.
I
Favorite,
hope I have nothing to report.
Yeah, that was good.
Me too.
Or good things to report about
Yeah.
Or good
Yeah.
things.
districting, so
Yeah. Yeah.
wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Well, that went
That was
well.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I wish more people showed up, but that was awesome. Let me